All right, everyone, we start off today with talking about polls specifically for the Democrats because in order to prevent Tulsi Gabbard from getting into the actual slot there, they had to have a lot of polls right before this debate that's happening, I think, like in a week or two. And so they could cherry pick them and they could find, which ones, due to the methodology, have her at zero because we can't have her up on the stage attacking Elizabeth Warren. That's a no-go zone because it'll fuck up the 2020 election because Biden may very well not make it to the finish line. Looking at these polls, though, we have Economist, Emerson, Quinnipiac, The Hill, USA Today poll, and Politico. So we have 6 different data points here. And I'm just sort of going to go through them. The big takeaway, though, is once again, you have a polling period. Supposedly, according to Monmouth, Biden was collapsing. That was like last week. I said that's probably an outlier. It's probably bullshit. We'll wait for more polls, and I bet that they'll show that Biden hasn't actually collapsed. That's happened. We now have 6 polls to 1 that all show Biden above where anybody else is. Like their highest numbers are lower than his lowest. His lowest number on this list, if you exclude the Monmouth poll, which is obviously an outlier, it doesn't sync up with any of the other data points, old or new. His lowest is 25. The highest anybody else is at is 24 for Sanders in the Emerson poll. That same poll has Biden at 31, so it doesn't exactly have him ahead. This is same old, same old. This is basically an unchanged field right now from several weeks ago when I did the last major polling analysis. There's really no difference at all. Here you've got a situation where Biden is the clear front runner. In the aggregate, he's at what? Almost 30. Sanders is in a close second at 17 in the aggregate. Biden has more than 10 points on the next runner-up. He's got almost as much support as Sanders and Warren together in some of these particular polls. You can combine their numbers and he would still potentially beat them. Now, on a state-to-state level, we have less polling, and this doesn't necessarily factor in. For instance, in New Hampshire, Biden has to do very, very well. Bernie Sanders has a home field advantage there. If he's 10 points behind, I'd still give him the advantage in winning New Hampshire, unless Biden cripples him in Iowa. If Biden goes into Iowa, pulls away an unexpectedly large win, that could demoralize the Sanders voters and make Biden look more electable. That could help him eke out a win in New Hampshire. At that point, by the way, he becomes a shoo-in if he gets both of those first 2 states. He's already considerably ahead, it seems, in South Carolina. That's number 3. And then you've got Nevada, where it looks like he's ahead. Again, you don't have a lot of polling involved. If we look at the other people in the field, Gabbard, who's not even going to be in the third debate, is at 1.4, which is not great. But 2 people that will be in the debate that are behind her, Julian Castro at 1.1 and Klobuchar at 0.9. You have to really do some fucking cherry picking in order to get them ahead of her in the polls. That's exactly what the Democratic Party did. And they did it. Don't make no mistake about this. This was a conscious decision. There's no way they coincidentally cherry-picked the polls to shift the aggregate for these candidates as much as they did in one direction or another to get Klobuchar, of all people, on the page when Gabbard's not. If I'm looking at the aggregated polls here, I see Klobuchar at 1 in every one of these polls, except for one where she's at 0. By the way, that same one shows Gabbard at 0. I'm assuming that's methodology related because it seems to be the case with all of the other candidates on the bottom except for Julian Castro. Meanwhile, people that are, barely eking out 2 points in the average poll, like Yang or Booker, will still be there. They're not viable candidates. The Democrats should have just said, okay, only the top 5 people are going to be allowed to debate. It's big boy time now. They should have just gone with that, but they didn't want to piss off the fans of all of these second-tier candidates. But they did need a way to keep Gabbard out, because otherwise she's the only one who struck up, and she did it really well and knocked Kamala Harris for a loop. Imagine if she did that to Elizabeth Warren. The DNC can't allow Sanders to become the nominee. They're going to do to him what they did in 2016. They're hoping to get him there for some youth appeal and then cast him aside, back into the abyss where socialism belongs. Biden is the shoo-in, and Elizabeth Warren is the stand-in, essentially. If their shoo-in doesn't get coronated, then they'll put Elizabeth Warren in there. That's their operative strategy. That's what'll happen. They don't care about Kamala Harris, but they do care about the fact that Gabbard was willing to attack her. Oh my goodness, she managed to help take down one of the top tier candidates. We can't have... See, Gabbard is a non-white female. so she can attack Elizabeth Warren in a way that nobody else on that stage will be. Look at the rest of the stage. Is there any other non-white female there other than Kamala Harris, who has already been knocked out? Harris isn't going to do that. Harris is a good lapdog of the establishment, and her fans are morons. And unfortunately for the Democrats, it's 7 or 8% of the Democratic Party, it seems. You've still got people listed, by the way, on the aggregate that don't matter. Like, I think Inslee dropped out. He's still, I believe... No, they finally took him off. Okay, he's gone. Gillibrand is still here at 0.1%, which is hilarious. I don't know what Sestak, I didn't know he was in. Bullock, Bennett, Stayer, I don't know who any of these people are, and neither do most of you. Ryan, which Ryan is it? Tim Ryan? Paul Ryan? Who fucking knows and who cares? Basically, now it's a tale of 4 people. Technically 3. You've got Joe Biden, who the DNC wants. Elizabeth Warren is the person they're willing to tolerate. Bernie Sanders as the so-called maverick that they trot out on stage and they let him whip the crowd up. And then you have everyone else. Kamala Harris is now down. What's she at now? She's at 7 points in the aggregate now. That's getting down to, that's I think below the floor that she had before, if I remember correctly. If I look at this, yeah, that's exactly where she was before she spiked after the first debate, where she did well, and then she rises up to 15. Briefly, very briefly, becomes tied with Sanders, and Warren loses steam fairly quickly. Warren is the obvious other shoo-in, because if I look at these charts, she's the only other person with the potential for long-term upward trajectory. Sanders doesn't have it. Sanders has been floored for a very long time. He peaked, well, when did he peak? Let me take a look. I'm looking at the RCP actual charts here. He peaked back in late April. So I wouldn't worry. If I'm Trump, I'm sitting here, I'm saying, look, my opponent is probably Biden. If it's not Biden, it's Elizabeth Warren. There is nobody else in this field right now. I mean, what you would have to have is Buttigieg would have to spike, which so far he hasn't really done, and he'd have to maintain it Warren style and not fall into the Kamala trap. I don't think he can do that at this point. It's been too long. He's been stalled out. He's at 4 points in the aggregate. I think that he is viable. If it's like Gillibrand, I don't think Trump was joking when he said that Gillibrand was the one that he really feared. Of course he did. New York, relatively well-liked, deflected on the Franken situation very well, by the way, threw the party under the bus, showed a bipartisan willingness. I know that she's a hardcore liberal. I know that she's like a Warren and that she went from like more of a sane person to the far left, but she's palatable within the construct of the Democratic Party, and I think could potentially have centrist voter, absorption, which is more than I can say for most of the Dem field. Sanders doesn't have it. Biden might not even have it at this point. He makes so many mistakes, he's so fucked up that it's not clear that he'll have any lasting support. Can you imagine an odd situation in which Biden goes in, he wins the first 4 or 3 of them or whatever, goes and sweeps half of Super Tuesday. Looks like Biden's going to make it. All the moderates in the party get behind him. They're not necessarily excited, but they've got someone to rally behind. And then he just fucking starts fucking up everywhere and totally collapses and can't be nominated, or he gets nominated, goes into the general, starts having worse dementia symptoms. The Democrats are setting themselves up for failure when their top 3 candidates, and both of the candidates that they want to actually crown in this position, which is what the Democrats do with their superdelegates, are geriatric. Elizabeth Warren is 71 years old. She's no spring chicken either. Nothing says youth appeal like an old woman who since the 1970s has lied about her ethnicity in order to get ahead in a heavy-handed, legalistic, far-left system called affirmative action. Yeah, nothing says youth appeal like that. I'm sure all the Zoomers will be lining up to vote for Elizabeth Warren. Can you imagine that? Like anybody's going to be excited about that. At least Sanders would drive the youth crowds crazy. At least Sanders would have some youth appeal. The problem is, again, he's older than Biden, he's befuddled, and he's incapable of winning. He's a socialist. The Democrats have jumped the gun and gone way outside the Overton window. And it's not helping that AOC is so prominent. Now she's releasing Soviet-looking propaganda posters about the New Green Deal. Like, they literally look like something from, like, a socialist movement in the 1910s. Take a look at them sometime if you don't fucking believe me. So there's a little bit of poll analysis. If nothing changes, Biden will be nominated. If he's not, it's almost certainly Warren. I would say there's a 90% chance that either Biden or Warren is nominated, and like a 75% chance it's Biden overall. The other 10% would go to potentially, a January surprise, Hillary Clinton in out of nowhere, as H.A. Goodman, I think, is still speculating. I don't think it'll happen, but We have to keep that possibility open. Always give a little bit of a slot to someone who's not in the race yet. I don't think it'll be any of the low-tier candidates. Most of them have already peaked out and fallen, and most of them peaked at 3 or 4 points. Like fucking Cory Booker, or even Buttigieg. I think, what was the highest he ever was in the aggregate? He hit 8.4. That's technically a peak. It's just a low one. He got in, he's fresh and new. He's a youthful face and he's gay, basically, so he peaks. But it doesn't really give him any real lasting stability. It's sort of like a Kamala deal. She was already, from the time she got in, she continuously, slowly lost support until she spiked, and now she's gone back down to her long-term floor, which is 7 points. Yeah. Gang out of nowhere. No, it's going to be Biden or Warren, probably. That's about all. Peace out.